think you were alluding to it earlier, like don't play the comparison game. Don't compare your son's recruitment or your athlete's recruitment to other people's recruitment. Recruiting shouldn't be stressful. It should be a bonus to all the hard work that you put in. Try and separate the comparison game and make sure that that's what your main focus is on. And if you can do that and enjoy your high school experience and be where your feet are, the rest will probably come.
Welcome to Athlete Country Club, the podcast built for parents, athletes, and competitors chasing the next level. I'm your host, Marcus McMarion, former Division I quarterback, now founder of Athlete Country Club. I started this show because, like many of you, I had to learn the recruiting process the hard way, traveling up and down the state, spending thousands trying to figure out what actually works. Each week, we break it down through two powerful segments. First, Coach Talk. This is where we sit down with college coaches, director of player personnel, recruiters to uncover exactly what they look for when offering scholarships. No fluff, just the truth from people making the decisions. Second, Athlete CEO. Here we go beyond the field, into habits, training, and mindset that build elite performance and long-term success. You'll hear from strength coaches, nutritionists, sports psychologists, and former athletes who've turned their grind into greatness in business, leadership, and life. Because being an athlete isn't just about playing the game, it's about mastering it and building your legacy beyond it. So whether you're a parent trying to navigate recruiting or an athlete ready to level up, you're in the right place. Welcome to Athlete Country Club, where we turn potential into performance and performance into purpose. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Athlete Country Club. I'm your host, Marcus McMarion. Today's guest is someone who's quietly shaped the recruiting world for over a decade now. Josh Patterson, defensive director of scouting at Oregon State, one of the sharpest evaluators and most transparent educators in the sport. We came together at Oregon State, me in the quarterback room, him as a volunteer assistant and recruiting intern, kind of grinding behind the scenes. His football 101, FB 101 kind of hashtag that he uses on social media content is honestly one of the most valuable resources online. I mean, it's clear, actionable, kind of straight from someone making real decisions. Without further ado, Josh, welcome to Athlete Country Club, brother.
Appreciate it, Marcus. Great to reconnect and get this thing going. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time. Yeah, kind of take us back to that. I mean, take us back to 2012, kind of 2015. I got there in 14. What did those early years kind of teach you about college football?
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, I know a lot's changed since 2015 when I was warming you up on the sideline at Michigan in the Big House.
That's right.
It's been a little different, right? College football has gotten bigger. Departments have gotten bigger. I think what I found out during that time was just my love for the game and my wanting to do it for a living. I tried to be a sponge around anybody I was around, whether it was a coach, staff member, just learn as much as I could because, I was coming from a high school where football was a big deal, but you didn't know what you didn't know. So being able to pick up some of those things and learn what I could was big for me and kind of what got it all started.
Yeah, no, you talk about it. You had an interesting kind of evolution of it too, to kind of your start to where you are now. And I mean, just kind of talk about, when did recruiting become your lane? And was there a moment where it kind of clicked or you had that aha moment?
Yeah, it's kind of a two-part answer for me. So first off, when I was growing up, my dream job was going to be the receivers coach at Oregon State University. Still chipping away at that, but that was the goal at first. And, ironically, fast forward, I get to Oregon State and I get in the equipment room. They put me with the receivers. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And the coach at that time, Brent Brennan, who's now at Arizona, shout out Coach B, killing it. He was kind of my guy. And so fast forward to the end of my academic career at Oregon State, I had to do an internship to get my degree. And I was like, oh, piece of cake. I'm going to do it with the coaching staff. I'm going to figure out everything I need to know and just go from there. So I go to Coach B, let him know my goals. And he says, yeah, you can shadow me, do all that. But what he did was he plugged me in with the recruiting department as well. I think twofold. I think he knew that was going to be, exploding as college football evolves. And probably secondly, he didn't want me to shadow him 24/7. He probably wanted to get rid of me a little bit. So I think that was probably a blessing in disguise because, for me on a personal level, I was learning college football on a deeper level. I got to be around him. I got to learn techniques, schemes, stuff like that. But my biggest benefit to the program was picking people up from PDX or Eugene, taking them on facility tours, giving them background on Oregon State. Right, that's where I was helping. So that was kind of the first thing where I saw that recruiting could help. And then after that, like you were saying, I started as a volunteer here. So eventually the funds ran out, right? I needed to get a job. So I ended up at a Division III school called Pacific University. It's just down the road here in Oregon. And I don't know how much you know about D3, but when you're a D3 coach, you're also the recruiter, you're the strength coach, you're the nutritionist, you're the academic counselor. Like, you wear a lot of hats. So I first get there, and the coaches tell me, like, hey, if you sign 2 to 3 kids this first year, you're doing a great job. Because A, I was brand new. I'd never done it at that level. And B, they were giving me areas where they weren't really getting a bunch of kids, right? Like, it was the outskirts of California. It was the outskirts of Oregon. It was Alaska, because why not? So fast forward to the end of that recruiting cycle, and I signed over 10 kids. And 2 of them were from Alaska, and the school never had any players on the team from Alaska. So long-winded way of saying hard work and just wanting to do good at my job ended up being successful for me, specifically in the recruiting side. And then I ended up being the recruiting coordinator there a couple of years after that. So
Yeah.
long-winded way of just being like, hey, do what you can and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome kind of just I think visualization for parents and kind of listeners to hear too, to where at a Division III school and now at Oregon State, I mean, you're big time Power 5 kind of program, to where it's a lot different how involved the coaching staffs are. And we've kind of had other guests talk about that, but kind of touch on just some subtle differences that are between a Division III school that might not have tons of funding to have 30 guys just completely dedicated to the recruiting department. And it might be the head coach and it might be the offense coordinator doing a lot of the legwork. So kind of talk about some subtleties between the different rankings and schools there.
Yeah, I think at the smaller level of Division III, right, the staffs are smaller. So if you're a coach, you're usually doing a lot of area recruiting. And I think that's the biggest thing from smaller schools to bigger schools is when I was there, we were heavy area recruiting. So I was reaching out to kids at all positions, and they were probably confused because I was the defensive backs coach. But it was really about knowing my area. I was the one that traveled to those schools. I knew those kids. And we were really just trying to get guys that fit the program as a whole. As you get to D1, everything gets more specific and nitty-gritty, right? You're going to start maybe with an area coach, but then it pretty quickly gets passed on to a position coach. And all of that really starts in the recruiting department where I work in. So making sure the right guys are getting to those coaches and kind of getting passed up the ladder.
Yeah, no, and I feel like it's a point that's been brought up, but I want to just hammer it home to parents and let them understand, and listeners, that it's like, hey, when a director of player personnel is reaching out to you, like, that is very, very important to take that message seriously. Like, oh, well, why isn't the head coach reaching out to me? It's like, well, you'll get to that point eventually, but there's a certain process to kind of get to that point and gradually working yourself up. But even just kind of like rewinding a little bit. I mean, obviously rising from volunteer assistant to director of defensive scouting and personnel and handling all that. I mean, like, what habits, I mean, just for you personally, kind of influence and kind of shaped that growth that you had?
Yeah, I think first of all, I was around just a lot of good people, like Coach Brennan, like I mentioned when I was here, Coach Riley, that was starting it all. And then even as I got to Pacific, a lot of guys there that kind of shaped my knowledge. But when Coach Brennan put me in the recruiting department, we had a really good structure. We had really clearly defined roles, and I credit a lot of that to Derek Ray, who's now the GM at Florida State. He did a great job of just teaching us the ropes. But then beyond that, honestly, it's just hard work, dedication, and putting your head down. I think for me as a support staff member, I knew my bread and butter was being accountable for coaches to get any job done. All right, so kind of a fun little story. I remember one of my first things that I had to do for a coach was go get his oil changed in his car, all right, which seems pretty silly, pretty pointless, probably not going to make me a good recruiter or coach, but that was his way of saying, do I trust you enough to take my car, not crash it, bring it back, and then get the job done? Because for coaches, sun up to sundown, they're pretty busy. So I do that, and the reason why I bring it up is because it led to, right, then he said, hey, can you chart this at practice? Right, okay, so I'm charting stuff down at practice. And then he said, hey, can you chart the stuff at games? Right, and so to me, I felt like I was contributing, and it all started with taking his car to get its oil changed. So just picking up more tasks as people can count on you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think it's definitely on a who you know kind of basis, but just like overall knowledge of it, it's very dependent on who you're around. Like, obviously, when I went through the recruiting process, I was the first one in my family to play Division I football or play any Division I sport. So it's like you're kind of just figuring stuff out as you go. Like, try this, that didn't work, don't ever do that again. Try this. Well, that kind of worked a little bit. Let me maybe do a little bit more of that and see if that's actually working. And I kind of say that just to kind of give you, I mean, like, your flowers to where you have basically a decade in the game kind of at college football now, and just sharing your knowledge through X. I mean, if you guys aren't following him, definitely take the time. I don't do this all the time, but it's like he's someone that's 100% worth following if you're trying to just gain overall knowledge about the process and really understand what these coaches are looking for. And I mean, just for you, I mean, like, why did you start Football 101? Like, why did you start that series?
Yeah, I think like you were kind of getting to, I'm getting old, right? I've been in this game a little bit now, going on about 15 years. And I just kind of got to the point where I felt like I had answers from being at Division I and Division III, from being a coach, from being a support staff member. I thought I had a perspective that could help a lot of people figure out what all this is. Because as you know, the rules are always changing. Each level's different. So I tried to keep it, clear and concise and short and sweet, and make sure I could get answers out there on the platform I had at that time. And I'm pretty grateful that you've given me another platform to do that today as well.
Yeah, no, and I know just kind of sorting through some of your tweets and things you've put out there, I know one of the things you talk about fairly frequently is just your actions are your resume. And like, what actions stand out or maybe disqualify recruits?
Yeah, I think a big one we always look at is just competitive spirit, competitive nature. And I think you can see that a lot through guys that play multiple sports. When we recruit a guy, he's probably the best player on his football team, right? But I want to know, right, is he the sixth man on basketball? Is he the one that's hustling, getting rebounds, doing the dirty work? Maybe basketball is not his forte, but he's got the competitive spirit to, hey, I might fail, but I'm going to learn lessons and be better for it. And so being able to do that, whether it's basketball, baseball, track, wrestling, whatever it is, and then implement that back into football so that you're better for it. And so I think the competitive nature is a big one. Effort is a big one, right? A guy puts out a highlight tape and it's 5 clips from a game. Well, you probably played 60 snaps of defense. So what were you doing for the other, right, 55 snaps? So watching full games and seeing if you're running the ball, if you play with your hair on fire, are you physical? Are you dominating when you should be dominating, or are you just kind of going through the motions? So that can sway somebody from being a guy or not. And then just leadership. It's kind of hard to see it on film, but guys that are pointing people in the right direction, are playing hard, you talk to their coach, right? They're somebody that they speak very highly of. Those are things that kind of sway you in a good or bad way.
Yeah, and just kind of talking like specifically to Oregon State's kind of process. I mean, you find a guy who's a high motor guy, his grades are good, he's kind of passing all the initial check marks, like check, check, check. What does that kind of step-by-step process look like once you've got the attention of Josh Patterson at Oregon State?
Yeah, so throughout a calendar year, we'll have times where I sit down with coaches, and usually it's going to be weekly, but depending on the time of year, it might be more frequent, it might be less frequent. But basically, you're trying to get on a list of 5 to 7 guys when I have an hour with a coach to show them. And usually that's going to be older guys, right? Juniors becoming seniors. Maybe it's in their senior season. We're doing senior evals. But just answering a bunch of questions that I have and that our staff has and making sure we feel good about it. Because I think a lot of things that we see, and I know people have talked about on your podcast before, is I get really excited because I hear good things. I go on Twitter and I see the height, weight, and everything's good. And then I go to the highlight and it says, 2024 or 2023. And I'm like, where's the new stuff, right? Where can I tell this coach that I'm convicted on this kid and we should be convicted on this kid? So, yeah, just a lot of different ways. But it starts kind of with our recruiting department and then gets to the coaches, and it'll move pretty quickly if all the boxes are checked.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned obviously the highlights really important. I mean, even I kind of scrolling through your Twitter and kind of having a weekly highlight, even if it's not a ton of plays, just having something that's recent for coaches to kind of break down. I know that's one thing that could be a missing piece that could really put a halt to your recruiting, maybe not completely stop it, but it's going to slow down the process of everything. And I mean, just like in your opinion, I mean, like what blind spots do athletes commonly have in the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think touching on what you were just saying, like making sure when it's your time to shine, you're ready to go. Whether that's right? Having your social media, your Twitter, your Instagram, basically be your resume, right? We should be able to know your contact info, your height, weight. We should be able to go to your media tab and see the string of offers you have, when you got them, training videos of you so we can see your frame, see your growth potential, see that you've gotten better. So checking those boxes is something to start with. And then kind of going back to your initial question, some blind spots. I think a lot of recruits don't realize that it's not really how good you are now, but how well do you project in the future, right? And so I think that kind of goes back into the multi-sport thing, right? If you're a guy that specializes in football because you really want to be a D1, D2, D3 football recruit, right? A coach might see that as you almost at your ceiling, right? Because you've already milked it for everything it's got. Now, when you play multiple sports, not only are you building more skills, right, learning new life lessons, right, but then a coach is probably going to say, hey, I think his ceiling's a little bit higher because he hasn't, focused on just football to be his whole life. Once he gets to our program, is with our resources, our coaching, we think this kid's, the sky's the limit. So I think that's a big one. And I think the other one is when guys get to the finish line, right? They're on a visit at a school and they're evaluating a school and a staff, realizing that the staff and the school is doing the same thing of you, right? We're still evaluating. If you're not respectful, if you're late to meetings, right? That's a big deal, right? That might make it so that we thought we were going to accept a commitment, but maybe we don't. So maybe a couple blind spots there.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I think the projection side of it thing is something that I've honestly never put too much thought into, but that's huge. And kind of thinking back to my own process, we're both kind of associated with Mike Riley in a sense too. He was obviously the one who recruited me there, and you're a part of that. And I'm thinking back now when I got recruited and offered, I was 6'1", 175, dripping wet. I obviously wasn't coming in right away like, this is our day one starter. This guy's an awesome guy. And we had Sean Mannion at the time, who's an absolute beast and part of the NFL forever, passing records in the Pac-12. So they knew I wasn't coming in to start right away, but just the projectability. I played point guard, I played baseball, I ran track, and I kind of did different things to eventually develop myself and towards football. And just kind of at the end of the day, I always try to preach to parents and let them know. They're always asking me, like, what are the tips and tricks? And yeah, there's a couple things you could kind of do to kind of put yourself in a better position. But I think at the end of the day, film doesn't lie. And I know that's something you've preached about through your social media pages as well. And what do you guys evaluate first on tape?
Yeah, so it's going to be position specific. There's always critical factors that we're trying to hit when we're looking at a kid. So, right, a couple examples. If we're looking at a DB, obviously speed's a big one, length's a big one. But going even deeper, like, what does your film show? Are you a zone player or are you a man player, right? Do you have the abilities to play press man? Because at this level, you're going to need to be able to cover to play at the highest level. So things like that, right? If you're playing zone, is that because that's what your team does, or is that your coach trying to hide some of your weaknesses? So trying to get all that background. And then, right, if I'm recruiting a defensive tackle, can I project that kid's going to be able to weigh 285 plus pounds a couple years down the road? Because if not, we just can't recruit them, right? We need to have bodies that are big enough to hold up against the teams we're playing. So there's critical factors for each position, but those are a couple examples of things that we'll look for.
Yeah, and I think, again, I feel like I keep reverting back to this, but that projectability, you can't help but think about my own process. And it's like, yeah, I was 175 dripping wet, but I had really broad shoulders. I was really thin and really skinny. So they probably thought exactly what you're saying. It's like, hey, this kid plays multiple sports. He plays football. As soon as he goes to football, he probably drops 10 pounds from all the running and stuff, So it's like you could kind of see different kind of nuances in it to where everyone's kind of projection is a little bit different. But just kind of more on that topic to even dive a little further. What should parents trying to help their kids and enable them and put them in a good position to receive a scholarship? What should the parents really be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is kind of the consistency of communication and who that communication is coming from. Figuring out if schools are working to get you on campus or working to go see you at your high school. Those are big things. And then just kind of seeing through what's authentic, what's real, and what's kind of fluff, right? Because a lot of kids right? And we're recruiting a lot of kids, right? We're going to send them graphics. We want to give them information, sell our brand, do all that, right? But then the list gets a little bit smaller when it comes to what position coaches, who are they calling, right? Who are we getting on with the head coach? Who are we trying to get on campus for a visit? So parents looking at some of those things to know maybe where they should spend their time when they're visiting schools, who they should visit. Looking at some of that stuff is probably important.
Yeah, and I think just as you're entering the recruiting process, obviously everyone's at a different spot, and just kind of speaking to the listeners right now, it's really important to understand and be realistic on your talent level and where you're at, and how do you become, oh, I didn't play Division I football, I don't know how to gauge that. The coaches will tell you, like, who's talking to you actively. Like, I know a
Yeah.
big difference for me is I remember right in the beginning of my process, I had my big junior year. I'm starting to get recruited. I remember I got a letter from Alabama, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm going to go play for Nick Saban. I got a letter from Alabama. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. Look back on it, it was some auto-generated kind of populated, like, hey, come to Alabama University. Our school population is XYZ. Like, nothing from Nick Saban, right? Nothing personalized. Then you fast forward to like maybe an Oregon State who actually was intentional. They wanted to offer me a scholarship. They're writing me handwritten letters from the offensive coordinator and from the quarterback coach and from the head coach saying, hey, Marcus, good game last week, throwing 5 touchdowns against Kingsburg. And you're like, whoa, like this isn't a auto-populated, just typed out kind of message that they're sending out to 100 different kids. Like, they actually watched my tape, like they saw it, they know. And I think that's where Josh and his team, you guys are kind of the conduit to keeping the coaches informed and in the loop about everything that's kind of going on. And kind of on that, I mean, like, what separates like offer worthy recruits from the maybes?
Yeah, I think that dives back into the kind of the critical factors like we were mentioning prior. But in addition to that, just how a kid's wired, right? What's he like when you go meet him in person, right? Is he a shy, timid kid that you're kind of nervous when the lights come on? Like, what's he going to be? Or is he the type of guy that just wants to compete and grind and is tough and is smart and all those kind of things? So that's kind of what we look for in an in-person eval, is not only checking the box of can he play football and do it at a high level, but what kind of person is he? Does he love ball, right? Do people speak highly of him in the school? Any of those kind of factors can separate and be the difference between a guy that we offer or a guy that we kind of wait and see on.
Yeah, and I think kind of just the education piece of it that you learn as people start getting more involved in the recruiting process and going through their own processes, you start to learn that the scholarship, kind of the differentiating factor a lot of the times, I think, is usually the intangible things. Like, if I've said multiple times on this podcast, if a school or a coach or someone's on campus at your high school recruiting you, I mean, they know you could play football at that point. They're there to dig and to figure out stuff because, again, we live in this NIL era and scholarship. Like, if they're giving you a scholarship, that's a huge investment that they're investing into a 17, 18-year-old kid. And just kind of on that note, I mean, like, how important is communication etiquette in recruiting?
Yeah, I think it's huge, right? And like you were saying, if someone in the recruiting department reaches out to you, sometimes that can be like almost a downer to a kid, right? But you need to see it as this is getting the ball rolling, right? And I kind of always say it as the 24-hour rule, right? If I reach out to a kid at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, I don't expect him to hit me back at 9:01 a.m., right? Because hopefully he's in class, hopefully he's where his feet are and doing all those kind of things. But by 9 a.m. the next day, I've kind of expected that you've had time to read that message and respond with either, hey, yeah, I can get that to you right now, or here's when I can get that to you. Whether it's a transcript, whether it's, we're asking for measurement videos, but being respectful without being stiff is probably the best way to put it, right? We're not best pals, but also you don't need to be, wearing your suit and tie via Twitter DMs.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that was an interesting transition as well, going through the recruiting process to where your first couple coaches, you are really stiff. You're like standing up straight, you're talking really, yes, sir, no, sir. And that's good to kind of always never lose that. Then you start to realize you do start to kind of build a relationship with coaches after, okay, we're talking just about every week during the recruiting windows when the time periods are open. And even that, I mean, that's a whole process to understand as far as like, hey, I remember personally reaching out to a coach and then they didn't reply to me. And I was kind of hurt, like, well, why isn't he recruiting me? Or why isn't he talking to me? Why isn't he responding to my message? And then come to find out, oh, it's a dead period. They actually are not allowed to talk to you, which they're usually pretty good about communicating that. And this was just kind of one-off deal that happened. So that's kind of important to know. But I know just in the process, obviously Oregon State, I want to say, because I went to Oregon State, the biggest university in Oregon. I'll double down. I'll double down on that. There's another school in Oregon, but the Oregon State's the biggest one in Oregon. When Oregon State offers a kid, I mean, I would imagine that's a domino effect usually follows. Like, what breakthrough traits kind of give you confidence to be a kid's first offer?
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't say it's any specific traits. I think we're just intentional in the process. We want to make sure we're checking the boxes of, right, your film's always getting better. Are you better as a junior than you were as a sophomore? Are you better as a senior than you were as a junior? Right? Can we check the box of an academic eval, a character eval? Have we seen you in person? And when we feel good enough about all those things, whether the kid's a freshman, sophomore, or senior, right, we're probably going to offer. I think what we're seeing in the landscape now is, the nature of the beast is once a kid is offered by Oregon State or comes on a visit to Oregon State or even commits to Oregon State, the SECs, the Big Tens, the Big 12s, they start sniffing around, right? And honestly, I see that as respect, right? If we're recruiting the right kind of kids, we're not going to get 100% of the kids that come on a visit or 100% of the kids that commit even. Because that's just the nature of the beast. But on the flip side, right, you better believe that us as a recruiting department are tracking other G5 type offers or FCS type offers so that the guys that check all those boxes, like I was saying, we're ready to act on pretty quickly when that happens.
Yeah, no, and I think that's it's an interesting kind of feel to where it's almost a copycat game, it feels like, in a sense, because even my process, I remember getting offered by Arizona, and then it was just a snowball kind of effect of all the other Pac-12 schools kind of fell in line, so it's like, okay, now you get an offer from Fresno State. Now all of a sudden Boise State's like, well, why did they offer him? And then Utah State. And then it kind of snowballs in that conference to where, in your opinion, why does that kind of happen? Like, are you guys essentially, if he's good enough to play at that school, then it could work out here? I'm sure you guys are doing your own due diligence as well, but kind of talk to that, why it's so difficult to get your first scholarship offer, but then it snowballs after that.
Yeah, I think it's a big question. It's a loaded question. I could probably talk about it for a long time, but I think first of all, it's going to be, do people know about you, right? Have you promoted yourself? Does a school even know you exist, right? And so I think what happens when the first offer comes, whether that school has known about you for a long time, but it's kind of wanted to keep you under wraps, just for recruiting strategy, maybe that's what happens. Or when they recruit you, other schools don't want to not know about you. You know what I mean, right? If a kid goes to Washington State and we're going to play them every year and we knew we had a Washington State offer but we didn't evaluate him, that's a problem if he plays really well, right, and is beating us or doing all those kind of things. So making sure that when there's like offers or even offers, like I was saying, at the FCS level, making sure we know about those guys, seeing if they have the upward trajectory to be a higher level player, all right, we want to know about that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And you kind of mentioned it about like watching a guy in person. Obviously, the film's never going to lie. That's going to be utmost important. But there is a sense, especially at, I'd say, some skill positions. Obviously, I played quarterback to where you could watch a guy on tape and he could look good, but then maybe you see him throw the ball in person and it doesn't quite look the same as it did on film. Or maybe the verse, or you see him in person, you're like, whoa, this kid is 10 times better than he looked on tape. Like, what, in your opinion, I mean, which camps actually matter to you and your staff?
Yeah, for us, obviously, our own camp's a big one. But in addition to that, right, those kind of mega showcases that you see and hear about, right, for us up in this area, it's the Northwest Showcase. I know Sac State does stuff, TCU does stuff, Redlands does stuff. Places where you can go and you have a lot of talent in one area and multiple coaches and divisions and colleges can be there. It's a one-stop shop, right? And I think what people don't understand at those kind of camps is we get lists beforehand to make sure that we know which kids we want the coaches to be paying attention to the most, the ones that fit our critical factors. And then if they see somebody that we were not aware of, they usually come and loop us back in and say, hey, this kid stuck out. Can you get a film eval on him, put him on my board, and then get the ball rolling with him? So the big showcases are great. Our camp is great. But it's really just going to be about where the most eyeballs are and who's actually wanting to watch you when you're at that camp.
Yeah, no, and I think that's super important information. And the reason I ask those questions too is because I was a first-time Division I college player, and we're going to XYZ national showcase, this national combine prep, blah blah blah, this and that, and it's like you realize that, in my personal opinion at least, if you're not going to a camp where college coaches are actually at and evaluating, unless you just have money to spend and to go wherever you want, if money's tight and funds are tight, go to schools that in camps that there's the ones that are offering the scholarships are actually the ones that are evaluating you. Is that like fair to say?
Yeah, and I know you've touched on it on this podcast before, right? If you're a guy that doesn't have any offers, but you think you're a D1 player, your goal should be to go to an FCS school and get an offer, right? Because that's now when you go to Oregon State's camp, you're going to be one of the guys that's highlighted on the list because, okay, Sac State offered this kid, so we want to be aware of him. He must, have something positive about him, and we want to make sure we're aware of him when he's on campus. And then if you're a guy that has a little bit more action, right, if you go to those bigger showcases, that's great too because now you're competing against higher level talent, more talent, and it shows that you're competitive and not just like, hey, I got these offers, I'm good, but also, no, I want to compete when coaches are there and show them that I'm that real dude.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is just your intentionality and kind of reasoning for showing up to the camp. Like I went to a ton of those big camps like NFTC, Elite 11, all these different things when I was going through my recruiting process. And it was good to see that it was like, hey, this kid, I know for a fact this kid has 3 or 4 offers right now to schools that I potentially want to be at. And then I'm able to go rep for rep with him right after and be like, you know what? He is maybe a little bit more polished in certain areas, but it kind of opens your mindset to where, hey, maybe I'm not as far off as I think. Like if I tweak this a little bit or do this or pick my grades up a little bit, like maybe I could potentially be a contender in that aspect as well. But obviously you have to be proactive in your own recruiting process. And for you and your staff, I mean, what's the ideal way for an athlete to send film and what's the wrong way?
Yeah, I think the ideal way is working through people in the recruiting department, and that's going to start with direct messages, right? If you have an open line of communication with somebody at a school, a DM is going to be a great way. I always think it's funny because one of my main jobs in the fall is to cut up full games of guys that we're seriously recruiting. And so then, a week goes by and that kid says, hey, coach, here's my highlight. And I'm like, well, I just watched your full game. Appreciate it, but, we're on the ball over here. But yeah, DMs first, email second, right? If you can go through a school's directory and find people in the recruiting department and have their email, do that. And if you can't find that, most schools are going to have like just a generic football at OregonState.edu or something like that, where that's going to go to a front desk or a student worker, but they're going to be able to get that to the right people so that you do get evaluated. So yeah, DMs, email. And then I'd say the wrong way to do it is to go to the coach. Like you were saying, right? If you are emailing the head coach, he's got a lot going on. He's got a lot of people he's managing, whether it's staff, players, schemes. He's probably not going to get around to it. And if he does, he's probably sending it to me. So maybe just start with me.
Yeah, no, and that's super important to know. And also just, I mean, obviously film is going to be what gets you in the door and kind of camps, but I mean, how do you balance, I mean, film versus in-person evaluation? And just a little context for it is I've had conversation with parents who may be a little misled in the fact that they're saying, oh, this kid got a scholarship because of his 7-on-7 tournament. And I'm like, it may have helped him, but Oregon State and colleges are not offering a kid just from watching 7-on-7 and not doing any other back work. Kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think film eval and in-person eval are always going to go hand in hand. For us, it's usually going to start with the film eval, right? Because that's what's getting us to send a coach to want to go see that kid or be in that area or whatever it may be. And that in-person eval is kind of what moves the needle, right? To, do I want to offer this kid? Did I get a good background report on this kid? Did I get a good vibe on this kid? right? Because these coaches are so used to working with guys at their own position that when they can go see a kid live and do the things that they see at practice every day from their own guys, they have a good idea if that kid can do it at our level as well. And then I think it'll work in the reverse at sometimes, right? Maybe you're at a school and you see a kid that you were recruiting, then his teammate stands out, and you're like, who the heck is this guy? Right? They might reach out to me and say, hey, number 22 at this school is really good. Can you get him on the board, get a film eval so that when I get back in the office, we can watch that kid together and make sure he's going with us at Oregon State.
Yeah, no, and I'll say this too. I mean, until I'm blue in the face, it doesn't always work out for every athlete. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe I was 6'1", 175. Maybe if I'm 165, maybe Oregon State doesn't offer me. Maybe I need a year of development to kind of get a little bit better, get a little bit bigger. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially with the transfer portal, everything that's open now. But I mean, just kind of parking on like the junior college scene. I mean, like how many JUCO transfers do you guys typically take on a yearly basis?
Yeah, that's going to be pretty dependent year to year based on the roster numbers, what you're looking for, position needs, stuff of that nature. What I can tell you is, just our defense this year, over half the guys came from the junior college ranks. We've got multiple safeties. One was at Kilgore in Texas, one was at College of San Mateo in California. We've got edges that were at American River, one was at Hutch. Starting linebacker that's at Butte College. Like, it's part of our DNA, it's part of our process, and something we really like about JUCO guys is they come with that chip on the shoulder that we see ourselves as at Oregon State, and guys that are just wanting to compete and wanting to play ball and wanting to do it at the highest level. So it's hard to give a number, but going into this year with a new coaching staff and whatever they see as how they want to lead the program, it could be a big number, it could be a small number.
Yeah, in junior college and high school recruiting is the same but different in a sense. Like what camps and showcases should junior college players be prioritizing?
Yeah, that's a unique one because in my experience, the camps are kind of set up for high school kids, right? They're in windows where high school kids are getting looked at. And junior college is usually more towards the end of the cycle, right? You go to junior college recruiting because you're looking to fill a need because somebody transferred out, maybe somebody got injured, and you're looking for more veteran presence in that room. So I would say more utilizing the spring window to go to spring games, go to spring practices, find a way to be on a campus so that a coach can see you visually, get your measurements, do all that stuff, but then learn that wiring like I was talking about, so that when they do see your film in the fall, that's kind of your golden ticket to be like, the film checks out, and oh yeah, I remember he came to our spring game, really liked that kid and how he was wired.
Yeah, no, and there's always obviously the physical traits and kind of the ball, kind of playing football, but for junior college, what are some of the like academic benchmarks that junior college transfers have to hit?
Yeah, so JUCO guys kind of fall into two buckets. So if they're a qualifier out of high school, meaning they had like over a 2.3 GPA, they can come to a four-year institution at any time. And then the other guys, non-qualifiers, they got to get their AA from that institution. That usually takes 2 years. And if they're on that kind of December grad cycle, that's like perfect for colleges because you want to get guys in January so they can be part of winter workouts and be ready for spring ball and just have a longer time of developing in the scheme. So they kind of fall into those two buckets, and it doesn't matter which bucket you fall into, but making sure you're ready to go when the school does reach out. That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, no, and I know obviously your job is the defensive side of the ball to get the best possible players that are available and that have the DNA fit and the culture fit to play at Oregon State, because I could speak to it obviously being recruited there and playing there. There's a certain kind of personality that does fit at Oregon State, and there's certain personality that will not fit at Oregon State. I mean, it's a very blue collar, nobody has any egos there. We're all team players and everyone's kind of working towards the same mission. And obviously personal accolades and goals are going to come along with that team success. But like just in the landscape we live in today, I mean, like how's the transfer portal just kind of changed roster building?
Yeah, I think it's made it so that you can fill holes on your roster a lot quicker. But it's also worked in the reverse where you have more holes because more people might be on the way out. So I think what a lot of schools are running into is you almost recruit people longer than they're on your roster, which is not a great feeling. But I think recruiting your own roster and focusing on retention, focusing on being transparent in the recruiting cycle and honest with the players, that helps guys feel good about, hey, this was the vision they had for me, and I still trust that that's the vision, and I want to see that through.
Yeah, and with all the nuances and changes that's happening in college athletics, I mean, there's been more change in the last 5 years than probably the last 50 years to college football. Like, how has it impacted high school recruiting?
Yeah, honestly, for us, I don't think it has. We're rooted in high school recruiting. We're a developmental program, right? We need kids that were under the radar, were overlooked, right? That still want to keep working and grinding for the 3 to 5 years that they're here. So that's never going to change for us, in my opinion. We're always going to, I like to say major in high school recruiting, and we're going to minor in, junior college and transfer portal recruiting because that's more of a supplemental tool, whereas high school is where you're building your roster.
Yeah, no, and some things will never change, obviously. I mean, you could get a guy who's rooted and guys who genuinely want to be there. Obviously, you guys could recruit in the Oregon area, and those guys have probably have had lifelong dreams of playing at Oregon State. So you're always gonna build a little bit more of a special kind of team and roster and bond when you could get guys that are bought in for a long time in there. But I mean, just in your guys' experience, I mean, how do you determine if a recruit's offer list is real versus inflated?
Yeah, I think one key thing to look at is when they were receiving those offers, right? A lot of guys will get offered as a freshman or sophomore, and that's just because the coach was at the school, probably seeing an older kid, but a coach said, hey, I really like this kid, think he's got a bright future, and that kid might get an offer. So knowing what the timeline looks like of the offer and then what the visit schedule looks like in terms of official visits, right? We see it every year where a kid's got 15 to 20 offers. They seem like really big offers, but then you look at his official visit schedule and he's maybe not going anywhere. Maybe he's only got one or two. So not always writing a guy off because he's got that SEC offer, and making sure you're diligent with when did they get that offer and is it still an active offer.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important, just to an education piece for people to kind of hear, and that's the reason I asked that question, because there's always going to be a sense of comparison as an athlete and as a parent as you're kind of going through the ranks, and you're like, hey, well, this kid has 15 offers, and this kid has this, and this kid has this, and I have one or two, or whatever the situation may be. Just understanding that, I mean, everyone's journey is different, and at the end of the day, like, I think between like 8 and like 12 offers, I'd say, to Division I schools. And obviously I wanted more offers. I wanted everyone to love me. But man, I'm so thankful that I didn't have 40 or 50 offers, because the recruiting process that those guys go through, understand, as much as Josh and his staff, they're evaluating you guys hard, right? They're looking at every aspect of your life on and off the field. You guys, as the parents and athletes, have to have a certain sense of worth about yourself that you also are evaluating the school, right? I went to Corvallis because obviously Mike Riley and the staff was amazing. But on the flip side, Corvallis is an amazing town to be in. I loved Corvallis is the reason why I went to Corvallis. Yeah, the staff, yeah, the team, they were really good. All those play factors. But don't forget, I mean, you're going to spend 3 or 4 hours playing football. You're going to be in that town. Make sure you love that town. Kind of just talk about the culture aspect of Oregon State and why it's so important.
Yeah, I think we definitely don't try to be something we're not, right? We're in a small town, without distractions, right? You're not coming here because you really want the nightlife of the big city, right? You're coming here because you want to go to the NFL and you want a good education, right? And so what we try and paint the picture for guys on is this is a place where you can focus on ball, you can focus on school, right? And making those the things that you major in. And right, we're in a great place just geographically, right? We're right next to the coast, we're right next to the mountains. You can get to Portland or Salem really easily if you want to. So making sure, like you're saying, it's a place that the football piece is probably really important to you, but then the other factors have to be, they have to matter. You have to want to be there. If you're having a bad day or it's cloudy outside, because sometimes it'll be cloudy here in Corvallis, right? You're still going to be in good spirits, right? And know that the vision that you were sold on and that you saw is still what it is.
Right. Yeah, no. And just as far as the parent aspect, I mean, what's one piece of advice that would save parents a couple years of stress if they just heard it right now?
Yeah, I think you were alluding to it earlier. Like, don't play the comparison game, right? Don't compare your son's recruitment or your athlete's recruitment to other people's recruitment because everything's different, right? And the way I see it is recruiting shouldn't be stressful. It should be a bonus to all the hard work that you put in, right? If people are reaching out to you, that should be a good thing, right? It shouldn't be a stressful thing. So try and separate the comparison game and the improvement game and make sure that's what your main focus is on. And if you can do that and enjoy your high school experience and be where your feet are, the rest will probably come.
Yeah, and kind of on that advice topic, I mean, what's a piece of advice? Say a kid's going on his first visit. What's a piece of advice from the recruiting side of things that you would suggest or give advice or maybe even calm their nerves about as they're approaching their first visit coming up? What are some expectations they could have?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've seen is, most parents have not been exposed to recruiting before, right? And it's changing all the time, so we don't expect them to. So really just being able to be honest and be transparent of what this is, what our expectations are, and then finding out what they're looking for, the athlete and the parent, and what their priorities are, that's probably the biggest thing. So as you go school to school, figure out what the top 3 to 5 things are that you're really looking for, whether that's geographic location, what conference they're in, what jerseys they wear, whatever the heck it might be, right? Come with those questions and don't be shy to ask them, right? Because we're here to make sure it's a good fit for both sides. We don't want you to come here just because we sold you some sack of crap, right? We want to make sure you're here for the right reasons. So come with questions, do some background information research, and just enjoy it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's huge. I remember talking with D-Ray actually too. He was there when I was on my visit and different guys, and you spend so much time with the recruiting department. Obviously, you're with the coaches, but you got to realize if you're on a visit, especially during season, they're prepping for a game that they're trying to win. So they're not going to be able to dedicate a ton of time to you. So you are spending a lot of time with the recruiting department. So I think that's can't talk about it enough how important it is to have that open line of communication. Think about Josh's suggestion of the 24 hours, which everyone's busy, things happen, but if it's taking you 4 or 5 days a week to respond back to a coach, you could kind of get the idea that they're probably not interested, right? To where at least you're giving that persona and that perception off. So just being diligent about keeping your phone and responding to athletes. And the last couple questions I'll kind of ask before you wrap up is like, what type of player thrives at Oregon State?
Tough, smart, chip on your shoulder, blue collar mindset, right? I like to think the guys that are probably pissed off that USC and Oregon didn't recruit them, right? We want those guys. We want the guys that, again, aren't at their ceiling. They don't want a ceiling. They don't see a ceiling. They just want to keep getting better. They want to keep getting better every year. All right, I'm sure you remember it. We would be out at practice for 2 hours, and then we'd have a 30-minute line at the jugs machine of guys just wanting to catch balls, right? And it's crazy because it's like it was receivers, it was DBs, it was linebackers. You might have popped in there, but I'm just like, what are these guys doing? Like, we just practice. Like, get the heck out of here. But then you realize, like, that's what makes you really good, right? You want to get better. You want to get coached. You want to live in the hard, right? You don't want to do easy things. So, yeah, smart, tough, and just want to kick ass kind of dudes.
Yeah, no, and I think just that intangible side of things is like it's been such a reoccurring and common theme on this podcast and listening to you guys talk. It's like football is one thing. Football is always going to be football, and you can develop your technical skills and do that. But it's just all the intangibles off the field that are really going to get you to the point that you want to be in. Kind of final question too. I mean, like you share. I mean, just so much knowledge through like your football 101 on social media when you don't have to. And obviously, again, thank you for doing that and kind of sharing with all the listeners and your followers. And if parents only listen to like this answer and not the full podcast, I mean, what are 2 actionable steps that they can take today, like right now, listening to this podcast to improve their child's chances of getting recruited?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would just emphasize, and I know I've said it before, but just being where your feet are, right? Be the best teammate you can be. Be the best student you can be. Control the controllables, because too often guys are written off because they didn't take care of business and the things that take no talent, take no effort, right? Just about checking those boxes. So as a parent, emphasizing we're going to be all right. Go to class, do your work, go to practice, lift your teammates up, be a leader, and things will come. So that's probably the first one. And then the second one, I know we talked about it, but just making sure those highlights are ready to go, right? Whether it's weekly, 3-game highlight, mid-season highlight, regular season highlight, full season highlight, like being prepared when a coach is sitting down with somebody from the recruiting department to watch your film and look at your Twitter and look at your social media, that you're ready to go. And you have something that they leave with more answers than questions. Because if that day is your day and you're not ready to go, it might be a while until they circle back on you. And that's not because you haven't gotten better, right? It's because we just didn't know at that time what that looked like. And I think if you take those two things, you're going to get a lot of people to come see you and want to do those things for you, right? Because the third thing would have been going to a camp, right? But a lot of the times, if you master those first two things, people are going to come see you.
Yeah, no, that's important. And yeah, I mean, Josh, I mean, today, I mean, you definitely, I mean, delivered clarity. I mean, just to a lot of families that probably rarely get that information. I mean, you kind of simplified the valuation. I mean, the roster building, kind of the JUCO strategy, and kind of the recruiting misconceptions. And I mean, just applaud your willingness to teach publicly and kind of impact thousands. I mean, you have thousands of followers, and a lot of those are getting 10, 15, 100,000 interactions. So, I mean, you're definitely making a difference, and I appreciate you taking some time today, brother, and sharing some information with our audience.
No, man, I appreciate you giving me the platform to do this, and I think you're doing a great job with this, and keep it going. Appreciate you. Go Beavs.
Yep, no doubt. Until next time, guys, appreciate you guys. This is Athlete Country Club.